Now, the whole regions, the states of the region are very much in favor of that, with one exception, Israel, including Iran, incidentally. But and the U.S. is technically in favor of it, like they say, yeah, nice idea. But nothing's being done, because it would mean that Israel would have to abandon its nuclear weapons, and the U.S. would not be able to deploy nuclear weapons there. And we're not going to accept that. Now, it's worth remembering that of all the countries in the world, the U.S. and Britain are specifically committed to this in a unique way. The reason is that when the U.S. and Britain invaded Iraq, they tried to provide a thin legal cover for it, which nobody took very seriously, but at least they tried. The legal cover was reference to a Security Council resolution in 1991 that ordered Saddam Hussein to eliminate his nuclear weapons. And the U.S. and Britain claimed, falsely as we know, that he hadn't done it. So that was the cover for the invasion of Iraq. We're just enforcing the Security Council resolution against the will of the Security Council, but minor footnote. But, well, if you read that resolution, Article 14 of that resolution, it commits the signers to establish a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East. So the U.S. and Britain have a special commitment to this over and above everybody else. Well, failure to, even if you had talked about it, even if you began to take steps towards it, it could lower whatever level of crisis there is. But the U.S. and Israel want to maintain the crisis. And in fact, they're carrying out serious threats, very serious threats. I mean, if anybody was threatening us like that, we'd wipe them off the face of the map. Mm-hmm. But this is okay, and it's Iran that's the outlier, not us, not Israel, not India. And going back to the media, it's like 100% agreement. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was waiting to see after Obama's speech about the outliers, if anyone would point out that Iran's potential capability is not the only case of a problem about the Non-Proliferation Treaty. There are, after all, 3 states that won't sign it. Mm-hmm. And we support them all. We tell them you don't have to worry about it. Well, how come that's not an outlier? Yeah. Because if we do it, it's right by definition. And anything that doesn't go along with it is wrong by definition. Actually, it's the same when you read about Iran defying the world. I mean, every article about this is Iran is in defiance of the world community and so on and so forth. Who's the world community? For example, it's not most of the states in the world. Most of the states in the world are what's called G77. It's the remnants of the old non-aligned movement. Mm-hmm. That's most of the states, certainly most of the people. They vigorously support Iran's right to develop peaceful nuclear energy as a signer of the NPT. So that's not the world. Well, what about the American people? Today, by now, I don't know, because after the propaganda the last couple of years, things have changed, I'm sure. But back in 2007, the last time there was a serious poll on this, a large majority of Americans thought that Iran has the rights of any signer of the Non-Proliferation Treaty to develop nuclear power. So they're not part of the world. In fact, the world means what's going on in Washington, the editorial offices, whatever governments you can pick up here and there who agree with you. That's the world. And it's just presented without blinking an eye. Anyhow, the whole story is that with nuclear, and there's a real threat of nuclear war. It's not small. Mm-hmm. It's come pretty close in the past. And it's kind of like, it's different from global warming in that destruction is instantaneous. In fact, if you look at U.S. Official policy, it is hair-raising. In fact, the worst, most extreme document that I can recall having seen is under Clinton. In 1995, the Strategic Command, which is in charge of nuclear weapons and so on, released a document. Released is a funny word. You have to look hard to find the word about it. It's called Essentials of Post-Cold War Deterrence. So now that the Russians are gone, what do we do? And it is, as I said, hair-raising. It says nuclear weapons must be the center of our policy. They're much better than chemical and biological weapons or conventional weapons for several reasons. For one thing, their impact is overwhelming and massive, not sort of slow and lingering.
Mm-hmm.
And for another, they cast a shadow over any crisis. So they allow us to use our conventional forces with more impunity because we're terrifying everyone. And then I go on to say that we have to maintain a national persona of irrationality and vindictiveness. We must maintain a sense of the world that we're out of control because then they'll be scared.
The drunk guy at the bar.
Yeah. Nixon was charged with having a madman theory. I don't know if he did or not. The evidence is not very good. But in this case, that's Clinton. It's a super madman theory. We got to terrify the world as irrational and vindictive. And nuclear weapons have to be the core of our... Also, first strike. We cannot give up a first strike doctrine, even against non-nuclear states. Okay. That was official doctrine under Clinton. They sort of implemented it in presidential directives and so on. Did you ever see a word about this? I mean, it's not secret. I've been writing about it for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's there,
Our guest you've been listening to, Noam Chomsky. This is Media Matters. I'm your host, Bob McChesney, WILL AM 580. We recorded this show a couple weeks before going on air, so please don't try to call in. Sit back, relax, and let us do the talking. Professor Chomsky, I've been using your books and articles in my classes for 20-some years now with great success. And one of the questions I invariably get from students who haven't been fully indoctrinated in how things work when they read your work is, why don't we hear more from this Chomsky guy? I mean, it seems this guy's a really smart guy. Why isn't he on television? Why isn't he a more prominent figure in our mainstream culture? And there's a certain naivety that's refreshing in a way when the question is asked. And I've often said, to some extent, I think you're a radical, obviously, for starters. But secondly, there are other radicals who've fared better. Has been one, your position on the Middle East with Israel, which is sort of the third rail that you can't touch. And secondly, though, is your critique both of the media and what I want to talk about now, intellectuals, academics, which I think, you've gone places that a lot of people haven't gone to, and I might have this quote wrong, and so correct me if I've got it wrong, but I think I saw something you wrote or said once where you described American academics as the most cowardly intellectual class in the world.
I don't remember saying it, but actually I wouldn't say it because there are plenty of others just like it. Academic intellectuals generally tend to be the most cowardly people around for obvious reasons, especially in the West, United States, Britain. Very privileged. It's a very cushy job being a professor in a university.
I know it well.
You may decide to work 80 hours a week, but it's your 80 hours.
Yeah.
It's about the one job you can think of where you're in control of your own work. Even faculties control their own work, so that's important. You're very well paid. I'll irritate some of my friends, but overly well paid.
No, it's true.
They have all kind of benefits. You're free of repression. People can yell at you or something, but you're not going to be put in jail. So you have all kinds of opportunities. You have resources. You have training. So you can tell the truth about the world if you want. Do they? There's a fringe. But it's a fringe. And what they write, that's extremely important, won't enter the mainstream. They may be invited as, a guest, give a comment or something, but not. It's quite peripheral.